This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
What's going on, y'all? It's your host, Will, coming back for a new episode of Field Note Fridays powered by Yamaha. On today's episode, as well as the next few Fridays in November, we're going to be talking about nothing but white-tailed deer and the rut. That's right, we're going to be bringing y'all a 4, maybe 5-part rut series with a very well-known mastermind deer hunter, well-known in the outdoor industry, known to kill multiple 200-inch bucks year after year after year. He's killed lots of them. He's killed some massive big bucks, and y'all probably know who I'm talking about, and that's Mr. Lee Lakosky, and he's known to kill giants. That's what he does, and his mind is the mastermind of deer hunting, and I can't wait to pick his mind on multiple things when it comes to the rut. We are going to be diving into how he hunts specific times of the rut, from pre-rut, peak rut, waning rut, late rut, and everything in between. And we're going to go down some rabbit holes, but we're going to really just try to get those golden nuggets for y'all from Lee, so that way it'll help y'all strategize on how you want to go after your target buck, how you want to target different times of the year with the rut. You can listen in on what Lee's done, how he's doing things, how he approaches different scenarios with different bucks, and we're just going to talk everything whitetail and everything rut with Lee. And so, y'all, we just want to thank y'all for tuning into the HuntStand podcast. We really appreciate the support. If you get the chance, make sure you download the HuntStand app. We've got free version, we got the pro version, and new this year, we've got our pro whitetail that has a rut map that gives you all these different date ranges for whatever county you're hunting in, or if you're going to be going somewhere else that's outside of your normal home range, you can look at trying to target the best time to go after the rut. And then we've also got our whitetail activity forecast tool on there that gives you the best 7-day forecast on when would be the best time to be out in the woods based on all these different conditions. And so if you haven't yet, make sure you go ahead and download that. And again, y'all, we just want to thank y'all for the support. Really appreciate it. But we're going to dive into this rut series with Mr. Lee Lakosky, and we hope you enjoy. Well, Lee, man, welcome back to the HuntStand podcast, and specifically for Field Note Fridays this week and this 4 to 5 part rut series that we're going to be doing with you.
Oh, yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to have you back on the podcast. And, don't think we need to do too much of an introduction again this time, but, tell us about the past 2 weeks. I've seen that you've drawn blood.
Yeah, quite a bit actually in 2 weeks, which is crazy. I mean, I have people text me now, well, I'm not going out, it's too hot and stuff like that. It's like, it doesn't matter what the weather is. It's, it's Halloween, it's November 1st, it's November 2nd. It's like, you really need to be out there no matter what the weather. I mean, if you can, obviously, if you're choosing vacation time or something, you might wait, but we have strategies for everything. If it's hot, windy, cold, whatever, and we're still seeing them and shooting them no matter what.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to get out there and you got to put time in the stand right now. I know it seems like kind of the consensus across the nation right now is that it's been really warm. It's been hot. And the funny thing is I've been hearing that from people up north in the Midwest. And yesterday I was wearing a hoodie down here in Texas. So,
yeah, it has been, especially here, but it's been super windy too. So there's obviously strategies and places that we have for the high winds and high heat and all that stuff. But like I said, when it gets around Halloween time, you better be out there if you can be, because I'm tagged out already. Plus I went to Alberta and shot a giant mule deer all within the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to be heading to Illinois either tonight or tomorrow. It's going to be the same thing there, hot temperature. So I know exactly what I'm going to be looking for. I know exactly what stands I'm going to look for and where I'm going to get cameras out and all that kind of stuff. So you just change your strategies a little bit.
So that's what I want to talk about. I think right now most of the nation is still kind of in that pre-rut phase. We've got some parts of the nation where things have started to get in the peak rut. We still have other people that they may not even be seeing any kind of rut sign. And so you've put 2 deer down the past 2 weeks. You just put one down, I think, what was it, yesterday or the day before?
Yeah,
and
yesterday.
Let's talk about the strategy that you're going to be going into this stand, or in these stands for the next couple of days in Illinois. Let's talk about, your strategy and how you're utilizing Pro Whitetail from HuntStand.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, my strategy there, it's going to be warm again. And it was forecast to be cooler next week, but that kind of changed. It looks like not until the week after, but I don't know how accurate they are when you're getting that far out, but so I'm just going to assume it's going to be like here, warmer temperatures.
Yeah.
And so we've done that, with a lot of our food plots, almost like all of my green food plots, we've been building ponds in them. And, you hear about ponds forever, but, it hasn't been more towards the recent years that we started making sure we're putting them right in our green fields because, that is what we use for, rut, early season, anytime when it gets hot out. They're always going to need water. And of course, there's creeks. There's all kinds of things like that. I mean, that's what I used to think, years ago. Well, there's creeks. There's all kinds of places to drink. I don't need to put ponds in there, but you really, until more recent years, I really started seeing the value of it. Of course, back in Buffalo County in the years, 20 years ago, everybody was doing that. And I shot some good ones over that, ones in the timber and stuff like that. But for me, mostly it was food plots I was concentrated on. But now that, we've got all of our farms basically, done the way I want them with food and with, hinge cutting and timber improvements and all that kind of stuff. So then we started thinking about, okay, what are the little things? And it's like, well, yeah, you can have water, but you're not going to necessarily hunt a creek bottom that's 8 miles long. Where are you going to go? So we started, several years ago, and like all of our clover and our turnip fields and things like that, our small ones in the timber, and especially the ones that, started pushing a lot of food plots in, like right in like the cedars or along the cedars. Over the years, you learn where they like to bed. Most of the time, I mean, those cedars are just a magnet for bedding for them, both winter and summer. In summer, it's shaded out. It's cool in there. In the wintertime, there's no snow. It's some thermal cover in there.
Mm-hmm.
And, so along those, that's where I've been pushing in, small food plots. When I say small, like 1 acre to 3 acres, you don't want them too small or it gets too shaded and you don't get anything to grow in them. But they're like 3 acres or, something like that. And I put a pond right in them on one edge of them. And that seems to be the ticket right now. And we're just strategizing for Tiffany tonight. Okay, it's really windy. Okay, we got 3 different bucks she's looking for. All of them have been visible, but some way more than others.
Yeah.
One of them is very visible, but he's more of a management deer. And the other 2 are big and they're both very similar. And one of them is very regular and one of them is not so regular. But, so you're just looking at 3 different strategies and it's like, okay, well, this one is here and this one's here and this one's here. Like today, even though it's more the management buck, this is a low field. It's in a bottom and it's green. It's beautiful because we've been dry and that's like those low ones collect all the water, more shady. We did it in our crushed clover in there first and then put amazing grains, which just like peas and wheat and stuff over the top of it. And it is lush as can be. And I just last year, they had excavated and put a big pond in there because that field was so low, it was flooding out all the time. Like off of one of the hills, it cut a big ditch in it. It was washing out the creek. So we made a big pond to hold that water in there. And so it's unreal. And so a buck that we call Big Bacon, her kids named him, is in there all the time. And so along with a lot of other bucks, that's one she's targeting. And of course, with lower fields, sometimes you get some swirly winds, but if it gets high like this, or windy, high winds like this, so we put a redneck in there, and just so when you get any south wind, is normally, when it's warm like this, we set up just for south winds. And even if it gets a little bit squirrely in there, in a redneck, you can close it up. You can spray, all the vent holes and stuff like that. You can spray.
Right.
Like we use the wildlife research, that the aerosol cans. Been working great for us. You can put no ozonics in there. There's a lot of ways that for just that little bit of wind, if you get a little swirl here and there, you can hold it in a redneck more than a stand. So there are stands in there right on the pond that, we'd use normally for south winds if it was light. But when you get strong winds like today, 18 to 20, it can start swirling around on you. So say, okay, that's our strategy. We're going to go down low, because down for them on the field level, they're basically out of the wind. It's down in a valley.
Yeah.
And it's green. It's going to be cool. On hot days like this, you got the big pond there. They're going to need water. We got a redneck in there to hold the wind in. So it's like, it may not be her number one choice on bucks on her hit list, but it's one of them. So that's the one that we're just going to. And so that's going to be our strategy in Illinois. Same thing. We put a lot of ponds right on fields, on those green fields. So and we focusing on those and bringing down, 20 cell cameras and start. So that's where we'll start, on green fields, number one, and ponds, and then work from there.
Okay. So have you seen that, especially like the buck that you just killed, are your deer still kind of in that pre-rut phase, or have they really started getting into the peak rut? Like, how have they been in your area?
Just kind of like what you would expect. Little ones are chasing and grunting. Big ones are just hanging around the edges. And that's where like the cameras really come in handy, because you get to see, they're working the scrapes. And unusual, this year, they're not hitting scrapes like as fiercely as they have in the past, but they're still hitting them. I'm getting like less pictures of most of our bucks than normal. And I don't know if it's just weather or moon phase at this times and different or whatever, but we're still getting them. And like this last buck that I just shot, he's not one that lives on us. You could go see him on our neighbors to the north.
Really?
I'm sure 100 people looked that out there and videoed him and stuff. But I only had like 2 pictures of him on our place all year. But once the crops come down up there, then everything piles back into ours. So I'd been gone, all of September and part of October, out west and up to Alberta and stuff. So I hadn't had a picture of him since July. And just bang, I got a picture on the north end of our farm, and he's kind of heading towards the field one of the fields I'm talking about for Tiffany that has a pond in it and green.
Okay.
And I was going to go there that evening, but then Tiffany wanted me to hunt with her for another buck, because he's in there. This is one of the bucks. Like I said, they just all have different attitudes. She got one of her big ones is just chasing does all the time. Even though he's 6 years old, he acts like a 3-year-old out there. And she's had him at like 40 and 50 a number of times, but only for seconds. And then he turns and chases doe. Every time she just ranges them, sets her pin, gets up to draw, boom, he's off chasing. So she's like, if you could come with me and just range it for me and tell me, so I have a little more time, because he's always moving. And so I went with her, and he did the same dang thing, but only came like 50 facing us and turned and ran. But it never came any closer, never gave us another one. Of course, that night, that buck and one of the other big ones, the buck that shot, we're in there like at 4:00. Early, like 3:40 something.
Dang.
And at 4:00, then he was back out at 5:00. This is the buck we call paddles. Well, it's PJ&J, but he's got these big paddle drop tines this year, which is crazy, because he's 8 years old, and he was always kind of a management buck for us. But it just kind of slipped through the cracks over the years, because, he tagged out on something else or whatever. And I'm glad we did leave him, because he's super cool now. I think the biggest he ever probably was maybe 155. He just had really short beams. He was kind of heavy and stuff, and I always put like a sticker or 2 off his 2s. But like this year, with big paddle drop tines, I didn't even score him yet, but he's probably in the 180s, I guess. So for a management buck, that was a total bonus. One that would shot or let somebody shoot for a management buck turned into a 180-inch deer. But, that was like that night, I was like, oh my gosh, they're right in there. But it was warm again. And I know those bucks were going right to the pond, even though the camera's on a scrape. They're hitting that scrape. They were in there for the pond. So I just went out that next morning, and at 9:30, we had little bucks in there chasing does and a bunch of does in there. And everything went to that pond and drank. And about 9:30, I said I was going to hit the rattling antlers once. So I grunted, hit the rattling antlers, and did kind of a long sequence. But I don't rattle continually. If you watch a real buck fight, they're mostly pushing.
Yeah.
Click, 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 and then just push in, grind a little bit, and wait a little bit, and then click them again. And I was really expecting something to come out, even if it was little bucks, and nothing was coming. So I did it maybe a little bit longer than I normally would. And I just hung them up and said, huh. And I grabbed the grunt tube again and gave it like a ball, and boom, out comes the buck shooting out. Boom, there comes another one. Boom, there comes another one. And then I could hear, like, I don't know if he was rubbing or just trying to get those paddles through. And boom, out he came, right right from underneath us. They were all on the east side of us, and there's a road down there and a house and stuff. I was expecting them to be on the west side of the field, but they all came from the east side, right under our feet, and I shot them at 30 yards. But that was the same strategy there because it's been warm this whole week, so we're just looking on green fields with water, and I think that people underestimate the water, and it doesn't have to be like these are pretty big ponds that I put in with a dozer and stuff. But my buddy Brad True from Matthews was just here hunting. He's coming back, but he just you look at pictures of from his cameras. I mean, he'll have like the top of a field, like we've got a big food plot at the crown of the hill. Even just dig a little hole and put a little like rubber roofing or something in it to hold it so it doesn't drain out. And they're small. I mean, they're 6 foot around, and he just goes and fills them with water when they dry out. And you wouldn't believe the bucks. I mean, all his target bucks, they all are going to that little tiny water hole. And it was really a little bit eye-opening for me too, because I always think of these bigger ponds like, boy, you don't have to. I mean, because I'm always thinking of something that's ditchy or hilly that you can trap water in.
Yeah,
you're just filling them. And so when this was, when he came the first time, I started seeing that. And then on one of our food plots, I had one of the bank's water tanks with the trough on it. So I put that out. This is going back a ways. This is early when it was hotter, in that second week of October. And I put that out in one of our food plots, and deer started hitting that like crazy. And I have my stand right over the top of it. And even though that 204, I shot a big one early, what didn't go to that to drink that time, that's where I shot him out of, was right there. He was coming in, but there were some other bucks underneath me that had been drinking in there. And I shot him before he ever went to that water tank. But it's amazing how little tiny things of water like that can make a big difference. And especially like, when you have like a big bean field or an 8-acre field or something like that, and normally we'd always put like a rubbing post out there or something to, something to direct them in front of your stand. It's a whole nother strategy, just digging a little impression out there and putting a small water hole, and they wouldn't believe how many of them come to it. So that's kind of something new that I just kind of eye-opening this year. And talking with Brad and stuff, and ourselves, we've always done stuff with bigger ponds, but just little things like that you can just pop in there. Maybe you only do it for that 1 year and you shoot your buck, and then you don't worry about putting that water hole out there again. Maybe you have a different food source or something that they come in closer to you. But it's really been a game changer when you got heat like this.
That that's a good thing to think about too, especially when you've got these water sources in the middle of these fields or at the edges of some of these fields, like you're talking about in food sources, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, how does your strategy change when those bucks begin to leave food sources and they're seeking and they're looking and they're really starting to roam? And I feel like when you have water like this, it almost kind of, like you're saying, it's kind of like that little golden nugget or hidden gem. It almost helps them. Or do you see it keeping those deer more concentrated in those areas instead of being more apt to leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now with the heat, and that's always a problem. I mean, when it's those cold days and stuff, that's what you kind of dream of, those frosty mornings, but you don't always get that. But it can be a blessing in disguise if you take those strategies up like this, because even though it's going to be like almost 80 here today.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for Tiffany because I guarantee she's probably going to see that deer. She's going to see a bunch of them. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if you look at our Instagram tomorrow and Big Bacon that she's shot him. I mean, it's a pretty big food plot too. It's like a 4-acre field. So, I mean, he'll likely be in there and at the pond and running around with does and stuff like that. But, it's big enough that it's 200 yards, all the way from one end to the other. And 60 yards across. So he could be in there without her getting a shot, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. When most people are like, oh, it's too hot, I'm not even going out.
Yeah.
When you have the right setup, that's where most of the deer are going to concentrate on. And like even Brad was saying, we were hunting a bean field on a place that it's a big food plot. So it's like 8 acres, and his son was hunting too. And we had this buck with split threes, and he was looking for him. We would see him every day on those beans, but he was just like, man, it's a big field. And he just never came close enough. He came like 70. And Brad was like, man, I wish we could just put a little pond right here, because I guarantee it, these deer would walk right over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we easily could. So now that I'm tagged out, I might just take, and all I have to do is take my skid steer with the bucket, just go dig a little impression. He puts a tarp down in there. He said, they'll start stepping it and poke holes in it, and it'll drain faster. But like if you have clay, you don't really have to worry about it. But I'm still going to put the tarp in there. And then he said, just put dirt over the edge of the tarp and stuff. And it just comes out with like a 500-gallon tank and just fills it up. So you might have to do it every 2 weeks or something like that. Because I guarantee you have a little piece of water out there, a little indent like that at 20, 30, 25 yards from that blind. Even if they have an 8-acre field, I guarantee you that every deer will come over and take a drink out of that thing. Give it 2 days there, and they figure out that water's there. You can bring them right to your stand. So
heck yeah.
And I was like, boy, I'd never really thought about that. I always put my ponds as something that's where we got some roll to the hill and you got a little bit of a ditch draining, and you can dam it up and have a make a permanent pond. But I never really thought about these little ones like that. And really, the next year when you go to plant it in corn next year, you just disc over it, and because you have to put them like a foot deep, where they enough to stand in it, and you just fill it right back up again.
I like that. I'm gonna have to think about that moving forward at our place here in Texas. And so, what I want to ask you next, this is more or less kind of for the listener that they may or may not have food plot on their place, or they might even be on public land. But looking at your resume and everything you've done, what do you do this time of year when bucks begin to leave those food sources and they become less visible overall? Like, how do you approach a hunt like that when you're running into something like that?
Well, the thing is, it's a lot of times, like I said, the bucks will leave the food sources, but the does normally don't. So a lot of times, and this is a good example from a buck I shot last year. Now, I tried him early and he was liking the food a lot, and then he just kind of disappeared. And when they get locked down, you just don't see him. And they're still right there close by, but you just don't see it. And it was a good example yesterday or 2 days ago. My buddy John Hoyer's down hunting too, our Missouri side. He's a pro fisherman, and we went by this buck. It's like this was like on Halloween, and so like the first rut activity I'd seen. I could tell it was a hot doe, and there was this 8-point standing just. I mean, he wouldn't leave. They were right next to the road. So you could stand there and take pictures of them. And then, it's like, oh, that doe is hot, for this early. Normally it's not until around the 7th or 8th you start seeing stuff like that. But it was an old buck, but he was an 8-point, not a super high score, but an old buck.
Yeah.
Just standing there, and he wouldn't leave. We could take all the photos and anything we want, because that doe was just laying bedded by the fence next to the road. And he was just standing over, just staring at her. He wouldn't even look at us.
Man. So
it's like, okay, see, that's what kind of like lockdown is. So we went. And because we were putting a rubbing post in the tree, because he was hunting a bean field. Like last time we had a corn, you could cut some corn, you can direct deer to where you want them. But now when it's a big 8-acre bean field on the Missouri side too, because a lot of our food plots are that big. He's like, well, the deer come up, but they have no way to direct them to you. So, we put a rubbing post out there. We just cut an oak tree down and had a stand that you put it in. We made scrapes underneath it. So those deer, they'll come out and they'll see that and they'll hit those scrapes and bring them to a stand. But anyway, it took us a couple hours to do that. And we came back by, and sure enough, he was sitting right there again, still with her. And so when he went out to hunt that night, he said, yep, they were still there. He said, I can't believe it. They're still just standing right there. The doe was up feeding around because there's an oak tree there and they were eating acorns and stuff, but they said they didn't move it anywhere. And when he came back out, he said it was crazy. He couldn't see. It was dark. Couldn't see in there. But on the shoulder, he said there was a big buck laying bedded in the road. And these are just little dirt roads, obviously, around here. So probably didn't even get 2 cars to go past them in any week's time, so it's not like they're like a highway well traveled. Yeah. But he said it was an old buck too. He said it was kind of a crappy buck too. But he said it was bedded right there on the shoulder, like right in the road.
God.
I said, yeah, she's still right there. That's why those bucks are there. But see, that's really what he just like, that's crazy. I can't believe they're there that long. I said, that's why I call it lockdown. I mean, lockdown, those bucks are still right there. They just don't move, but they will just go wherever the doe goes. So when you have those cameras in, you keep the cameras in your food plots and stuff, and still we'll see when the doe comes out and you'll just see a buck standing there staring at her. So that, okay, that doe isn't necessarily going to leave. So she's right there. So that's when, like last year, when I lost that 10, I couldn't find him anymore. But I knew like where the doe's all bed. So we just went in and we put a stand in the timber, and just looking at the HuntStand app and looking at it. Okay, these are all cedars, and then there's like 2 big patches of cedars, but in a drainage ditch that goes in between those patches, it was hardwoods, and it's only like 75 yards across, maybe from cedar thicket to cedar thicket. I was like, walking through those cedars, they're probably walking the hardwood stuff because it's more open. The cedars are, all the branches go right to the ground, and it's, they love to bed and stuff in there, but it's not the easiest to walk in. So I bet you they're taking this ditch down. So we went and put it in the timber there, where I thought, because we weren't getting any pictures of him anymore. I said, he's got to be right here. This is like over the 3 weeks that I've been hunting him. This is where we're getting the pictures between this field and this field. And so it just makes sense that they're bedding right in here in between them. And that's where like the mapping and all that stuff from HuntStand comes in handy, looking at all that stuff, looking at the aerials on that. Just one of the things. And then, we put it in there. The next morning, bang, he was right there with the doe. And he came to maybe 40 yards at once, but it was, in the timber, it's like we have branches in the way, never had a clear shot. He would not come to our side of the ditch. We're like, gosh, we contemplated that side of the ditch. And then for wind, we thought we should go to this side of the ditch. It's like, gosh, I wish we would have been on that side of the ditch. They were there all day long. And how many different bucks came in there, and he'd walk them off. So many times we thought, okay, this buck coming, okay, he's going to run him right here. And she'd run right to her stand. And boom, he'd be chasing a buck one way, and that buck would do a 90 and turn and go right up into the cedars, and he'd chase him up in there. It was like, it was so frustrating. We stayed there all day, never got a shot. So the next morning we go out, and it was supposed to be super windy, like 20 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And so it was like early, like at 7. I was like, normally I wouldn't rattle or anything that early, kind of wait to see what happens first. Yeah. And, a lot of times I don't rattle unless I see one that's not coming. But I was like, you know what? It's going to get super windy. Maybe I should just rattle right now. Well, everything around here can hear it in case he's right in here someplace, because later on it might be too windy for him to hear it. And I hit him, and boom, I see a deer coming, and it's him comes right up the ditch. And that's the one I shot right underneath me at like 6 yards. Dang. So sometimes, like when you're not getting pictures of them and like they're locked down, it doesn't mean that they are gone 2 miles away. That's in some places, that's like sometimes like in our Kansas farm that we had and that stuff, they would travel a lot farther because the deer numbers weren't that high. Yeah. So they would travel a long ways, to find does. But like around here and in a lot of places where you have a lot of does, those bucks, as they got older, their core area gets smaller and smaller. Most people know that if you have like a 5-year-old deer, a lot of times here, they hardly leave a 40 or an 80. You get almost 99% of the pictures that you'll get are within a 40-acre piece. Okay. And so when you have a lot of does, they're likely still right there because there's does. And when they're done with one, they'll just find another one right there. Mm-hmm. So they're likely not going. They'll take, not that they won't go and wander to look for does, maybe right at the very beginning or maybe right on the Thanksgiving right at the end. But in the bell curve at the top of it, when lots of does are coming in, they likely don't spend 10 minutes to find another one. Okay. Right there, because we have plenty of does. So they're likely not far. So a lot of times I just get into the timber, someplace where I think the does are bedding. And you learn all that stuff from shed hunting and stuff. You got snow, you see where all the beds are. And these are those cedars that I was talking about on that one. I knew that they bedded in there, but they probably walked the hardwoods there because it might be easier walking. They maybe go up into those cedars and bed. And they were usually bed, from shed hunting too. You find a lot of those sheds right on that transition from the cedars to the oaks or the hardwoods. They like to bed right on those edges, and where you find a lot of the sheds. So that's where we just kind of put the stands in places where does are bedding, and that's where bucks are going to be cruising through there, and they're not really interested in food, but they are interested in those does. And if the does, they don't change their patterns like bucks do. They kind of still go about their normal business until they're being bred. And then a lot of times they don't go into the food either. They just stay in one little spot and they'll eat acorns or browse. They don't really go as much, but you still will catch them in fields. The does will walk out there and feed for a while, and the buck will just stand there and stare at them. Right. Stomp at them, do the high step at them every once in a while and move little bucks off and stuff like that. And sometimes a lot of times that's at night, but at least they're still right here. And so you get in the timber, and then if you see them, you can try a snort wheeze at them. That's worked for me. Usually grunting doesn't. They're already with a doe, but the one thing that I have pulled them off a hot does is with a snort wheeze. And of course, the one last year rattled, but he was probably in between does when that doe that he was with that whole day, the day before, likely he's done with her, or she was, whatever happened, but he wasn't with her. Then the very next morning, he just came in by himself. So
okay. So you would say then right now, this time of year, the best strategy when you run into that time where they just become less visible, like you said, it's you may not necessarily hunt the food source per se, but you've got to get in and you've got to e-scout and you've got to try and find, where you think they're bedding and pretty much hunt kind of that in-between area, if you will.
Hunt the does where does are bedding. If you know the area very well, I mean, if you're going to a public place and you don't know, you can still kind of see, even like here, like we have some bucks that I never am getting a picture of them, but I know they're there because there's so many. We had a lot of acorns this year, and we have a lot of big oak ridges. And so he's just sitting on an oak ridge someplace. You just wait. Because we hunted one early, and I hunted him, and he was in the field, and I never got a shot at him. Then I put Tiffany over there after I shot the big one. I said, "You go hunt that one."
Okay.
And she saw him, and then that was like on October 10th or 11th. And we haven't had a single picture of him. And then I had one last night in that same field. But everyone's saying, "Oh, he must have got killed." I was like, "No, he's not. I guarantee it. He's there. He's just 6 years old. He's a deer that, I guarantee it. He's just sitting on one of those ridges eating acorns. He's still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
He just moved to acorns." And I just got a picture of him last night in that same food plot. But then I guarantee it, I can probably tell you what ridge he's on. Because, he's 6 now. As I've been watching him since he was 3, because he was pretty big since then. I just kind of know his routine. And that was kind of his MO over the years. Maybe when he was 3, you don't really pay that much attention to him. And he goes a picture, and you get another picture of him, a week or 2 later. You go, "Oh, yeah, he's back again." But he was kind of out of mind, But now when they're big enough, you kind of keep them in your mind. It's not like one that you easy would forget about.
Right.
But I always knew it's like that's kind of his MO. But I guaranteed I could go where I shot my second buck last year, and that thing is full of white and red oaks, and that's where all those does were focusing on that last year when I shot the other one there, Night Stalker, on that same farm. Like I said, I guarantee it. That buck is on. Likely I could go into that ridge in the morning and find them in there. Okay. But that's just kind of getting to know your farms and stuff. Like, okay, where are your oaks? Where are your acorns falling? And walking some of that and seeing, man, this whole ridge, it's like walking on marbles out here.
Yeah.
So, they could be right there. And, just knowing where most of your does are bedding and where the bedding areas are, they're going to be right there. They're going to be close to it. They might not be coming out to the fields. They might not be hitting the scrapes anymore once they get on a doe, but they're still going to be right there. Especially the peak of the rut, they don't want to leave their core areas. That 40 acres that you find them in all summer and all early season, all late season, that's where they want to be. Not that they won't wander out of there, but likely if you have high deer numbers like us, there's going to be enough does that are right there too. That's where they're gonna get those does first. And once they run out of does, there's no hot does in their area, then they'll obviously wander. But still, 9 times out of 10, they're still going to be right in that same area, just locked down with a doe. Just like I was talking about with John on that road. See that doe? We're talking almost 20 hours where that buck was just standing there with that doe. They didn't leave a 10-yard area.
I can't believe
that's what they're doing. Yeah, it's crazy. And then one bedded right on the road. A buck bedded on the road, right in the gravel.
These deer are insane sometimes, but that's why we love it. And so find the does when they start going off camera and they becoming less and less visible. So find those does and find that area, that sweet spot after you've done your research, your e-scouting, and done your time with boots on the ground. So where you are up there in the Midwest, how much longer do you think it's going to be till the rut is just wide open, just insane, peak rut? When do you see that happening?
I think it's basically the same every year, between like the 7th and the 10th. Like I would say, like the 7th is probably like my favorite time. That's when you normally see it. Yeah. And there'll be so many times that people are like, "Oh, the rut's late this year. It's early this year," and that's normally not the case. It's always the same. You don't see a bunch of fawns all of a sudden. Oh, they're all born in January, or in July.
Right.
It's all in May that they're born, basically. So it's 90% of them are all that same time. You just may not be seeing it because it could be hot, like you're saying. You don't have, if you're just hunting timber, you don't have the ponds, you don't have cameras everywhere, you don't know, you just think, oh man, it's slowed down to a crawl. But all those bucks are just doing what the one was on the road for John. They're all just standing there wherever a doe is at, so it always happens at the same time. But just when it's colder, you may get more of that daytime movement. But I would say, like here in Iowa, normally it's around the 7th that you really that I really see it going. And you can tell just by like scrapes, like, and all of a sudden they disappear off the scrapes. Like right now you get, you put a camera on a prime scrape on one of our food plots, and you get 20 different bucks a day, mostly little ones, but you'll get your big ones in there too, hitting those scrapes. But when those cameras go dead, it's on, because then they could care less about scrapes and they got actual thing right there. Yeah. They got does there. They'd care less about it. Okay. So, but it's for us, it's like the 7th.
Well, that's any day now, man. And so,
dang right.
Next week, hopefully we're going to be talking more about the peak rut, and, we're finally kind of getting out of that pre-rut for a lot of people. But before we go, I know we're running out of time here. Give the listeners any kind of little special golden nugget that you might have that they can take and put in their pocket before they head out in the woods this weekend, just in regard to the peak, or in regard to the pre-rut.
Well, one little thing that you can really look at that really makes a difference, that, the moon phase stuff, everybody's heard about it and everything else. Yeah. But if you go like to, if you look at like Adam Hayes, how the big deer that he's shot, and he has his moon guide. Mm-hmm. I go off that a lot. And a lot of times you'll see like the best days. I mean, when you look at it on something like that, you can see, okay, these, if you just had to take time, like a week off of vacation, I would look at that. But a lot of times you look at like when the moon is directly overhead or underfoot, and we do it like for musky fishing all the time. I mean, you can just see it all of a sudden when you start getting to that peak, bang, you start getting follows, and then you get right like an hour before, during that bang, that's the third reel, and bang, the muskies hit. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of the same thing, on deer, is just, it's not always prime, moon stuff during prime hours, but you can still see. It's like when you have just a couple cameras out, it's hard to see. But like right now, I look at my cell camera thing. I got 156 out right now. I still have another 30 to put out. Wow. You can see it a lot of times when that moon is directly overhead or underfoot, and it might even be 12 o'clock noon. So you think, nothing, it might be 70 degrees. Over those 150 cameras at noon, or sometimes close by, you'll see some activity by so many bucks. It's not near what it is if it was at 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. right now on a cool day. Yeah. But you can see it when you have a big sample source. So just take a look at, the moon phase, not necessarily the phase, but what time a day it's overhead or underfoot. Okay. And, there's a lot of the moon stuff too, but that's a little thing, that just lots of little things that I look at every day, see when you should be out there and when it's going to work. And that's why, basically in 2.5 weeks now, I shot 2 200-inch deer and a 180 in a terrible times and terrible weather. Mm-hmm. But it still doesn't matter. It's not like they dig tunnels and are hiding from you. They're still out there someplace, and they move every day. Yeah. They move a lot every day, whether you see them on your cameras or not. Trust me, they're on their feet a lot. Every day. They are.
Well, Lee, man, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk deer hunting, talk the rut with us. I love doing that. I'd always pick something up for you whenever I get to podcast with you. So I'm definitely looking forward to next week when we get to talk about the peak rut, and hopefully seeing you down, or Tiffany down, with another big giant on Instagram. So
I think you will. In a week, let's hope we do. But Tiffany's awful close, and we'll be heading to Illinois. So like I said, that we'll be getting peak rut, and we're looking forward to hunting in that too, and looking forward to talking to you next week about it.
Sweet. Well, good luck to you, Lee, and appreciate your time as always, man.
You too, Will. Thanks.
All right, y'all, there you go. Pre-rut, talking it with Mr. Lee Lakosky. He's got some strategies and stuff that he shared with y'all on how he targets bucks and what they're doing this time of year. We're about to be in the peak rut, or your area. You might be here pretty soon. And so we're going to be talking peak rut with Lee next week. He's going to be heading to Illinois. We're going to see what kind of action he has while he's in Illinois this next week, and he's going to report back to us, and we're just going to talk deer hunting with him. So we're going to find out how this next week goes for him. But again, y'all, thank you for tuning into the HuntStand podcast, Field Note Fridays, powered by Yamaha, and we'll see y'all next week.